hopefully help you. It's a rule for you to consider. If you're up 20 to 25% on a stock, consider taking most profits then. Most stocks will go up that amount and consolidate those gains at that new level anyway. Now, what this will do is this puts the number in your favor. We call this our 3-to-1 ratio. 3-to-1 profit-loss ratio. You can be right 1 out of 4 times and still come out ahead. Now, on the left, you get a 25% gain, you have 7% losses, your portfolio's intact. On the right, same thing. You make a 20% gain, you have 7% losses. Your portfolio, again, is basically intact. You're in a position of strength. Your confidence is in check. You have not been hurt. You're ready for the next investment idea. Now, we have one exception to this suggested rule of selling and taking a profit at 20 to 25%, and that's number 14. Which says, if I own a stock that goes up 20% within 3 weeks, I should hold it for at least 8 weeks. Now, this rule assumes that you have a growth stock on your hands that is a classic can slim stock. It's a group leader, that you have quality sponsorship, and of course, you're in a bull market. Now, you remember a little bit earlier I mentioned you have to be able to recognize your unusual weakness. We also have to be able to recognize unusual strength. So most stocks, we're going to lock in our gains at the 20% area, but if one runs up rapidly, we're going to play it out for a larger gain. Here's an example of Certainteed back in 1961, where Bill O'Neill bought it. Notice the aggressive pattern up and then the sideways action. We have a high tight flag here. And then it breaks out. And he interprets it correctly. And as it goes, in its 6th week, it all of a sudden has a sharp pullback, and it scares him out. Then, after he's shaken out, it turns and it triples. So, being a good investor, and not happy with his results, he did a post-analysis on the trade. And then he compared his findings to other model book stocks that had big moves to see if some of his theories were consistent with other stocks. And he found that some great winners would pull back to the top of their base after they break out, that was actually normal behavior. So he comes up with a rule. If this stock jumps out and it's up 20% within the first 3 weeks, that is unusual strength. There's something going on here, possibly. So I'm going to hold it for 8 weeks because that gets me through that rough patch until it's up and off the runway. Well, along comes a stock called Syntex in 1964. It has the same aggressive pattern, the same high tight flag. It emerges from that base. He sees it. He makes his purchases. And by coincidence, in the 6th week, it does the exact same thing as Certainteed did, except this time, Bill is armed with a rule. If it does this, I will hold it. And in this case, if it does 20% within 3 weeks, I'll hold it for 8. So he holds it for 8, and it gets him through that rough patch. You see, there's no thinking now at all. You've completely turned it over to the rules. It's on autopilot. I've got to sit for 8 weeks. And the only way to break that rule is if the stock completely breaks down and the 7% rule, which is that safety net down below, gets triggered. But in this case, I doubt that would really happen without some extraordinary event or announcement. At the end of 8 weeks, this stock is up 63%, at which time he forms a 6-month rule. I am going to sit with this stock and let it go for 6 months and see what happens. I might have a big winner on my hands. It's certainly acting very powerful. Also, the reason for the 6-month rule was back in the 60s, you may remember that capital gains was exceedingly high, And so he made the 6-month, 1-day rule so he could get over that hurdle. Well, at the end of 6 months, he was up 550%, and this was one of the key stocks that put him into business. He used the money to buy a seat on the New York Stock Exchange floor. Now, in discussing this case study with him, here are a couple of comments from Bill O'Neill. This was the most important analysis discovery of that time period that I made. He's referring to this 8-week rule. And referring to certainty, I had a huge winner and I got scared out. And here's what I think was the key in the conversation. He said, if you go on how you feel, you'll never hold on. Number 15, the market is always right. Right. Only the market will tell me what my stocks are worth. Let the market tell you the way it is, and you adjust accordingly. It's no big deal. You see, if we always agree with the market, won't that make it easier for us to stay in phase with it? So our job is to figure out what the market is doing and go along with it. Never think that you're smarter than the market. That can be very costly. Number 16, price to earnings ratios, PEs, were proven not to be a cause of outstanding stock performance, but rather an end effect or end result of excellent and improving earnings. Earnings and sales increases. Keep your eye on those. Stocks follow earnings. Now, PEs are the very foundation of Wall Street. The stock market is an auction marketplace. Everything sells for what it's worth at the time. What advice do we get from Wall Street typically? Buy this stock because it has a low PE. Sell that stock because it has a high PE. This stock is oversold, etc., etc. Those are all opinions. Those are personal opinions. We, in fact, don't look at PEs on the buy side. Stocks sell for what they're worth. Great winning stocks, PEs are higher because those stocks are in demand. The funds want them. We all know how many funds there are in the world. And what we're talking about is a small universe of stocks that are truly outstanding. And most of those funds and hedge funds want those stocks, so they're bidding them up. That's why they have a higher PE. Here's a quick example of this. AOL, back in '98, the PE at the pivot was 205. How about Amgen, back in 1990? The PE at the pivot was 48. Amgen went up 681%. AOL went up almost 500%. NTAP, a squirrely stock at the time, 142. A lot of the great winning stocks start with a higher PE, again, because they're being bid up. A good analogy we have is ask yourself, looking at your portfolio, how many Jordans, Michael Jordans, do you have in that portfolio? Or do you have a bunch of rookies? Well, as a coach, you could have Michael Jordan on your team. You'd have to pay a lot for him. Or pass on Michael Jordan and get a couple of rookies because you'll get several of them for the same price, won't you? What will your results be? You see, you get what you pay for in sports and life, and you get what you pay for in the stock market. Passing up a leader because its PE is too high and buying a laggard because its PE is low is exactly backwards. We're not looking for bargains. We are looking for the best. We want to buy the best stocks in the best industry groups now. So back to that question. How many Jordans and how many rookies do you have in your portfolio? The stock with a PE of 21 is worth paying 21 times earnings. The stock with a PE of 50 is worth paying 50 times earnings. We are not going to be able to buy a very expensive high-end car for cheap. That's backwards. See, the market doesn't care what we think, or that supposedly this stock is undervalued or overvalued. The market obeys the laws of supply and demand. That's it. In closing, you have to have rules. Rules to protect you and guide you. Every human frailty comes out in the market. The market preys on them. You have to be flexible. Never plant your flag in the ground and say, I know this is a good stock, I'm going to hold on to it, it'll come back, when you're down 40%. We follow facts, and as the facts change, we change.